The United States is reportedly growing more dismissive of the European Union after the bloc failed to agree on a plan to use frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. According to a recent report by a British news magazine, Washington now views the EU as divided, ineffective, and unable to act decisively on major global issues. The disagreement centres on billions of euros belonging to Russia's central bank. These funds were frozen by Western countries following the escalation of the Ukraine conflict. Most of the assets are held within Europe, making the EU a key decision-maker in how or whether they could be used. For many months, EU leaders debated the idea of using these frozen Russian funds as collateral for a special loan to Ukraine. The proposal was often described as a reparations-style arrangement, designed to help Kiev cover rising military and economic costs. Despite long discussions and intense pressure from some member states, the plan ultimately failed. During a high-level meeting on Friday, EU governments were unable to reach a unanimous agreement on moving forward with the asset-backed loan. Instead, EU leaders chose a different approach. They agreed to raise joint debt to provide Ukraine with financial support totaling around 90 billion euros over the next 2 years. This decision shifts the burden directly onto EU taxpayers, with estimates suggesting annual costs of about 3 billion euros starting in 2028. The failure to secure agreement on the Russian asset plan is said to have deepened frustration in Washington. The British outlet reported that US officials see the EU's inability to act after prolonged debate as further proof that the bloc lacks unity and influence. The report suggested that US policymakers believe the EU's internal disagreements make it easier for Washington to sideline Brussels when making strategic decisions. This perception aligns with past comments by US President Donald Trump, who has repeatedly criticized the EU. In a recent interview, he described European nations as weak and claimed they are struggling to manage key challenges, including migration. Recent developments suggest that the US may already be acting on this assessment. According to media reports, the Trump administration has held direct, behind-the-scenes discussions with individual EU member states rather than relying solely on Brussels. These contacts reportedly played a role in shaping opposition to the asset seizure plan. Countries including Italy, Bulgaria, Malta, and the Czech Republic were said to have resisted the proposal during Friday's summit, contributing to its collapse. This approach highlights growing divisions within the EU and reflects Washington's willingness to deal directly with national governments when consensus at the EU level proves difficult. The frozen Russian funds are not just a financial issue. They are also seen as a strategic tool. Reports indicate that President Trump views the assets as potential leverage in future negotiations with Moscow related to a possible peace framework for Ukraine. An early draft of a US-backed proposal reportedly includes a clause suggesting that the frozen assets could be unfrozen and redirected into reconstruction projects. These projects would be led by the US and involve cooperation between Ukraine and Russia. Under this reported framework, Washington would take 50% of the profits from these reconstruction efforts, though the proposal remains preliminary and unconfirmed. Russia has consistently condemned any attempt to seize or repurpose its frozen assets. Moscow has described such actions as illegal and has warned of serious consequences for those involved. Russian officials have stressed that taking the funds would amount to outright theft under international law. They have also warned that European banks and financial institutions could face lawsuits and long-term damage to their reputations if the assets are touched. During a recent year-end press conference, Russian President Vladimir Putin addressed the issue directly. He stated that any funds taken from Russia would eventually have to be returned. No matter what is taken, it will have to be given back, he said, warning that those involved would face legal action and loss of trust in global financial markets. Legal experts have raised concerns about the possible fallout for Europe's financial system. If Russian assets were seized, banks holding the funds could face lawsuits in international courts, as well as retaliation from Russia. These risks were a major reason some EU member states opposed the plan. Critics argued that short-term gains for Ukraine could lead to long-term damage for Europe's financial credibility and stability. By choosing to raise common debt instead, EU leaders avoided immediate legal risks but opened themselves up to political backlash at home, where taxpayers may question why they are footing the bill. The episode has renewed debate about the EU's role on the global stage. Supporters of stronger action argue that the bloc missed an opportunity to show leadership. Others say the failure reflects deeper structural problems, including the requirement for near-unanimous agreement on major decisions. For the US, the outcome appears to reinforce a belief that Europe struggles to act quickly and decisively during crises. Whether this perception will shape future transatlantic relations remains to be seen. What is clear is that the frozen Russian assets remain untouched, for now, and the question of how they will be used continues to hang over diplomatic, legal, and political discussions on both sides of the Atlantic.